Dave Burkett here, along with Sean Windsor and Carlos Monarez, coming in from off camera. And Sean, Lions wrapped up their season, I guess, in, as Graham Glasgow said, sort of a microcosm of the season, I guess, was the game today. Losing to the Green Bay Packers 23-20. They get off to a good start, score the game's first 14 points. In the end, they couldn't quite put the team away. Left just enough time for the Packers to score a game-winning field goal. Finish the year 3-12-1, and here we are now, I guess. We head into the offseason, and I want to bring this up. Don Muehlbach, you were there when we were talking to him after the game a little bit. He said, this season feels nothing like some of the seasons he had early in his career, 0-16, even the Middleman March years, back when he first got to Detroit. He said there's a lot of hope, and I know you're a believer in that. You think there's some hope that came from this season for the Lions.
I don't know if there's hope, but I think they deserve participation trophies, right? They played with a lot of spirit today. You brought your pom-pom, or no, Carl's brought the pom-poms today, right?
No, they did. There was a lot going on today, right? Marvin Jones lost his infant son on Friday night. I think it was an emotional day for a lot of people in the organization. Obviously, there were, injuries have taken a toll on this team, and I thought, they fought about as hard as they could today. I gave Matt Patricia and the coaching staff an A- for getting them to this point, but in the end, it was just sort of the same old story. We've seen this before, and no surprise, I guess, that it went down like it did at the end.
Well, I think you have to say a little surprise. I'm not sure what score you picked, Sean, but Dave and I both picked about 13 point, handily, the Packers winning handily. But for them to show up, and, we were talking during the game, they got, Amani Awari out there and Steve Longa playing linebacker, and Will Harris is making plays. He's a rookie, that defense hasn't been very good this year, but to have those guys, we're looking at some of the guys, everybody's injured reserve every time they're making a message at Ford Field, injured, IR, all these guys are IR, right? So doing what they can with what they have, I think you're right, Dave. The coaching staff deserves some credit for getting them to this point. They were winning late in the fourth quarter. Yet again, it's frustrating, but you have to look beyond just, hey, they're just losing leads in the fourth quarter. The fact they're even getting leads and sustaining leads this late is a tiny bit of a miracle.
Well, go ahead.
I would just say, to add to that, I think you're right. When we talk about the spirit that they played with, the competitiveness they showed today, and they've done that largely the whole season, really, especially the last month. But the young guys out there, or at least part of that probably has nothing to do with the coaching. They're trying to prove something. So if you want to, ding on the staff a little bit for that, or make sure you don't give credit to the staff for that, that's fine. But I would say beyond that, Patricia talked about after the game that they're trying to lay a foundation. He felt like they competed. I know it sounds cliche. I know it sounds like coach speak. But what we've seen on the field is true. The question isn't that. I don't think he's lost the team like he started to last year. I think it's about talent. That's the to me, more pressing issue. And can Bob Quinn take care of that in the offseason?
Well, certainly at this point of the season, there's just not much talent on the field. I went through it the other day, and they've lost starters to IR at just about every position: quarterback, tight end, wide receiver, a couple on the offensive line, defensive line, linebacker. Obviously, the roster is decimated at this point. That's no solace for what's happened this year. I think everyone is pretty disappointed with where they're at.
For sure.
3-12-1, an embarrassing record in a lot of ways to be this bad after they had so much hope. But you talk about the future. They're going to have the third pick in the draft right now. The Washington game is still going on. They're down 20 points. They're going to have the third pick in the draft, so they're going to have a chance to add a really good player, probably on the defensive side of the ball, and they need that player to be both an instant impact guy and a cornerstone player for the future.
No pressure, whoever
No
it is.
pressure.
Yeah, no pressure coming in.
Third pick in the draft, though, you should be able to get that, right?
Well, it depends. We were talking about that, too, during the game. I think Jeff Seidel was here. We were talking about that, and who can you get, and maybe the cornerback from Ohio State. And cornerback is a notoriously hard position to play well very early on. Players usually struggle the first year or so. So to expect the guy, and especially depending on what happens with Darius Slay if he's gone, if he's the new Darius Slay, all that pressure mounted on this one guy who's going to come in here, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. I think it's tough for a lot of guys, Jadeveon Clowney's, any even your premium guys, the number one picks, the whatever. Stafford, right? He was number one overall pick, pretty good quarterback. He didn't light the world on fire his first year. It's a lot to expect a guy to be a transformative player in his first season.
Look, if you think the defense is good enough, the roster is good enough, that player should be able to step in and play right away, and that's what the Lions have been selling. Hey, we built this foundation. We're there. We're ready to compete, and they obviously haven't competed this year. That's what they're selling. Look, cornerback, I understand your point, but tell that to Denzel Ward. He was a Pro Bowler as a rookie. I think if it's the right guy and the right player, he can have a huge impact, whether it's at cornerback, defensive line, wherever it is.
Or you could get radical, and his name escapes me, but there are a couple of tackles out there too. One in particular is gonna
Offensive tackle you're
Yeah,
talking
it's going
about?
to be a top 5 guy.
Yeah,
and
Andrew
you're-
Thomas, Georgia. That might
Right,
be the-
maybe you do that. You got Ragnow, who's headed for the Pro Bowl at some point. Maybe not this year, obviously, but I don't know about Glasgow. But think about an offensive line, at least half of it, that would protect Stafford in a way he probably has never been protected. Defenses, it's hard to stop offenses these days. So you could make the argument for that.
Yeah, no, I think the Lions will have lots of options. Look, it's probably going to be Joe Burrow going number 1 overall. I know we got plenty of time to talk about the draft here, but probably Joe Burrow going number 1 overall. Washington at pick number 2. Obviously, there's the Tua factor. If someone wants to trade up for Tua Tagovailoa, they're going to have options because Washington at 2, the Lions at 3, the Giants at 4. Probably none of those teams are taking quarterbacks. But you'd think Chase Young is probably going number 2. That's going to leave the Lions with whether it's Okudah, the cornerback, as you referenced, Andrew Thomas, an offensive tackle from Georgia, Derek Brown, a defensive tackle from Auburn. We all know Matt Patricia loves his defensive linemen. There's a Snacks Harrison factor. Maybe he's gone. So the Lions are going to have lots of options. And again, I think as you look at sort of where this roster is and what the Lions have pitched, as being the hope for 2020, I think that player needs to come in, be an instant impact contributor, and really help elevate this team to playoffs. Playoff contenders, I know the phrase they use, but playoffs. Otherwise, we're going to see a regime change after 2020.
Well, I think you would be. You're right. That high up, any of those players you named would be not only hopefully an impact player right away, but a building block going forward, no matter who the coach is, the regime, whatever, right? Chase Young probably going to be a good player no matter what for years. So you hope there wouldn't be so much pressure, but the Lions fans, as we've seen with T.J. Hawkinson, were brutally tough on him,
He's a tight end.
I know, but there's a whole
Ebron factor.
But it's going to be the Slay factor. If Slay's gone, then it's going to be like, oh, we traded Slay for this, and we should have kept Slay, and blah blah. Just like the Ebron thing and all these other, So that's the danger. Is just I hope they will be a good. They will probably be a good player. I think T.J. Hawkins is going to be a pretty good player. As time goes on. But to expect them to come in, the Denzel Wards are probably exceptions. They're not the rule. So it's a tough task.
I would just add a couple things here. One, it's not just the pressure from the fans. It's going to be the pressure that the coaching staff feels, right? And Quinn to find and make this pick work because they've got kind of a mandate to at least contend for the playoffs. The other thing, too, is just thinking about Green Bay here today. In Week 6, I think Game 5 on a Monday night in Green Bay, they were a couple of calls away, and boy, I hate to get back to calls, but a couple of calls away from having a winning record and beating now the number 1 seed in the NFC on the road. And the bones of that team are coming back. Now we talk about all these injuries and so forth, and I know they need more talent, but there is something there to build on. It's not like it's a 3-win team with nothing.
Well, yeah, and I'll add something to this. When you're talking about the talent and the coaching and this and that, and people think give Patricia I'm too easy on the Lions, whatever. But when you think about it, step outside of the Lions' point of view. Look at it from the Pack. If you're a Packers fan, or even if you're an NFL fan, you're looking at the score at this game, and if you're a Packers fan watching this, and Aaron Rodgers looks like a third stringer out there today, and you've got guys like Will Harris making plays and Steve Longa, and who are these guys? David Blau is the quarterback. If you probably haven't heard of half of these guys, and these guys are beating the number 1 seed in the NFC North for most of the game.
I don't know. I felt like, okay, they seemed disinterested for half of the game.
Right.
That's what they seemed like. And I don't know that it was so much Amani O'Reilly making a play. Yes, he had an interception, but that was an arm punt.
Ball.
Yeah, look, Aaron Rodgers didn't look good. One
good.
sack. That doesn't.
Tracy Walker.
One sack. Tracy Walker had a couple balls. Look, the Lions they made some plays today, especially in the secondary. I thought Tracy Walker had 2 batted down passes, 1 in the end zone. I thought he played well, but I didn't come away from that game thinking, "Wow, the Lions' defense was great." I came away from it thinking, "Man, is Aaron Rodgers washed up?" I even told you during the game. At some point, Aaron Rodgers is 36 years old, I think, right? And that just made me think, this is the Lions' window. If you're keeping Matthew Stafford and you're rolling forward with this, Matthew Stafford's 32 years old. He's coming off back-to-back seasons where he's had back injuries. At some point, Matthew Stafford is going to be Aaron Rodgers out there, where Rodgers was a great quarterback. He's going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. And now, the way that he looked today, you sort of looked at it man, this is not the same Aaron Rodgers. And we're going to be saying that about Matthew Stafford in a couple years. And so I wonder, yes, the Lions, as they roll forward with Matthew Stafford, this is the window, the short window that they have to capitalize on this, and that's all the more reason why that number 2 pick has to be somebody that makes a huge impact. And if it's not, if they have to change regimes next year, all of a sudden you're looking at, well, is Matthew Stafford the quarterback going forward because of the Aaron Rodgers factor today? I mean, that's the way that I looked at
You're
it.
just setting up your column. Let's just face it.
No,
He's already laying the foundation, like some
The
coach we
foundation.
know, of a great column that you're going to write.
Well, look, you mentioned the foundation too, the bones of a foundation being here, and I think there's some truth to that. I mean, I think, look, this is probably not a 3-win team talent wise, but I think we have to be honest with ourselves too. They were 3-4-1 when Stafford got hurt, so you extrapolate that for the course of the season, you're on pace for another 6-win season, what they were last year.
Well, you could also argue they had a couple of tough losses, not just the one in Green
Well,
Bay. They can go either way, so you can't say the second half of the season they don't get a couple of
Okay,
plays.
the Chargers game, they were a healthy kicker away from losing that game here.
No,
The Eagles game, they were a healthy wide receiver
I
core away
understand,
from
but they
losing
had
that
a
game.
little something about them. You're right. Maybe they win 6, but it's just as easy to say they could have won, gone 5-3 or whatever in the second half of the season. I mean, you just don't know. They looked
Or 3-5, same thing.
They looked a little bit.
We don't know. I mean,
but based on what we saw, they looked a little different early this year. They did.
But to your
and
point,
you can see it, and you can hear it in the locker room. You can see it in Allen Park. You can It's not the same as last year. It's not. It's just not.
I love these videos with these, so I love them. This is great. Go ahead.
Because we prove you wrong all the time. One of the questions I get on the blog when I run that, a lot of the questions have been lately is, what do you think the team would have done with Stafford healthy? And I think that's something where you can't discount that no matter what. They would have beaten the Bears twice probably. Probably would have beaten Washington.
They would have beaten Arizona. That's what we all thought too, right? They didn't. They tied Arizona. Right now it's the exact same thing. They should have beaten Kansas City. Guess what? The defense doesn't come up with a 4th and 8 stop on Patrick Mahomes. They should have beaten Green Bay, right? They didn't. Maybe it's officials' calls, whatever. Just like you can't say they're going to be 3-5, you can't say they're going to be 5-3. So you have to take them at what they were.
I'm not saying for sure they're going to be that. I'm saying you can't say for sure they're going to win one freaking game.
No, but
excuse me, use
Sean,
your words.
I'm saying what they were is a 3-4-1 team. That's what they were, a team with a losing record. That's what they were with Matthew
And
Stafford.
how often does it happen that a team gets on a roll in the second half? It never happens. I know it's never happened here, but I'm just saying.
Okay, but see, this is what you're saying. I can't say that they're going to go 3-5, but you can say they're going to get on a roll. No, they're not. I'm not saying that. I'm saying
You're probably right. That's probably what would have happened. I'm saying you can't say for sure it wouldn't have. That's all I'm saying.
They were a 3-4-1 team with Matthew Stafford. That's the bottom line. They were a losing team with Matthew Stafford. They were a terrible team without Matthew Stafford. 0-8 without Matthew Stafford. That's a bad team any way you cut it.
With a couple of defensive linemen, one who wasn't the same from the start, somebody else who was injured from the start. The defense.
They're the only team with
injuries
injuries in the
front
NFL.
7. No, I'm not saying that, but to say that injuries don't matter is just.
I'm not saying they don't matter.
Okay.
I've said all along that they
But
matter.
you talked to me at the beginning of the season about how you thought the defense would be a little bit better based on what we saw the last month of last year, and there were some injuries that affected that, maybe age too.
Absolutely. Age, injuries, coaching, whatever. I mean, they weren't a very good defense to begin with. So I don't know. I just, rather than dealing hypotheticals of they may be 5-3, they may have been 3-5, whatever. Let's talk about what they were. They were a 3-4-1 team with Matthew Stafford. That's not good. They were an 0-8 team without him. That's not good. So they were a bad team overall.
I think they had a hard start to the schedule. I mean, we were talking about
Eagles were great,
like
Chargers were great, Cardinals were great, right?
1-4, 1-5, or something like that to start. So, and I think the second half of the schedule eased up. They got healthier. Trey Flowers, Snacks got a little healthier. I mean, I think they played better overall as a team in the second half, especially defensively. And they just found their way. And they got, give them credit. They got Bo Scarborough off the trash heap, and he's been a contributor. So I think there was more promise in the second half. When you have, let's just not forget this, David Blau is a third-string, undrafted Cleveland Browns reject. I mean, then he's been keeping them somewhat in the games, and that's a lot. Stafford would have done a lot more than that.
Agreed. Stafford would have done. I think Stafford would have done a lot more than that. But regardless, they are what they are, right? You are what your record says you are. They're 3-12-1 to end the season. Real quick, you were in the Snacks Harrison scrum. Yeah. He was very emotional talking about his future. We don't know exactly what the future is going to hold, but he was talking about his health, the possibility of retiring after the season. That may open up another hole that this team has to fill. Just fill everyone in. What did he have to say? What was your sense walking away from that interview as to the decision that he's going to wrestle with here going forward?
I mean, it was one of the most emotional locker room speeches, whatever, after interviews in a long time that I've seen with the Lions. It really sounded like he was done. Like he just couldn't do it anymore. He said, it's tough because, my mind wants to, my spirit, but my body just isn't there. He's dealt with a lot of injuries. And he was a Pro Bowler like 3 years ago, or All Pro rather, 3 years ago. Last year he was a transformative player on the Lions D-line, the run stuffer. And this year he was just not that player. He was a shadow of himself. That's got to be hard, And he said, I got a lot of pride. I don't want to. If I don't want to go out there. He didn't say I'm going to embarrass myself, but he doesn't want to go out there and embarrass him or put the team in a bad position, right? Where they've got to play him. He's not making the plays. He actually played pretty well today,
Agreed.
But I think I find it hard to believe that he would come back. I mean, it just when a guy is that emotional, that upfront about it, saying everything. Basically, it almost sounded like he said he was going to meet with his family and look at options,
Yep.
But I think it would take a major change of course or some big thing that would have to change his mind for him not to, because he sounded like a guy who was ready to be done.
As you were talking about him there, that sounded a little bit like Calvin Johnson and the decision that he was wrestling with really for a year before he retired. Just when you can't play at the level that
Right.
you're used to playing at for a long time, which is extremely high in both those players' cases. Sometimes it's not worth it to you to continue playing and not being able to be out there and be as dominant a player as you were. Now maybe he'll have to. There may be a financial aspect to that decision too. If he retires, or will the Lions force him to pay back some of that money? I mean, it's a question that has to be asked with this organization. He got a $7.5 million bonus last year, so that's $5 million he may have to pay back. So no, not in the Lions' eyes. I mean, so there's a lot of decisions ahead for this team, a lot of moves that may impact that. Beyond that, you mentioned Graham Glasgow earlier. It's another guy that I think signs point to him playing elsewhere next year. He said after the game that he wants to feel loved. He wants to be shown some respect, essentially, by whoever it is that he deals with next year. So Sam Martin's a free agent. I think there's the Stafford health should be back. Everything should be fine, but it is 2 straight years with an injury. So I think there's a lot of questions heading into the offseason. Let's end it with this. Beyond the draft, Sean, who or what is going to be the thing that you're going to be most interested in following about this team this offseason? Is there one of those moves, one of those players that you think is going to be most important, I guess, to this team in 2020?
Before I answer that,
Yep.
can I ask you a question? Are you ready for Carlos and I to move on? Have we passed our primes? Is that what you're suggesting here?
loved.
Yeah, exactly, because we're not feeling that right now.
I mean, Lions fans will speak. I mean, we will hear from them on Twitter.
And I'm sure they agree
as
with you.
Yeah, as
They'll
they
always
told me
agree
after
with you.
our last video together,
They'll
they were
always
like,
agree
"Who
with
are
you.
those 2 yahoos that you're out there
They'll
with?"
always agree with you.
Yeah. So, all right. So, anyways, no, I love you guys. I mean, we have some good discussions here. It's really good.
To me, if we're just talking about
Not my
next
fault,
year,
you're wrong, but
and
go
this
ahead.
is obvious, obviously, but to me, if we're just talking about next year and the mandate to contend and get to the playoffs, it's about the quarterback.
Absolutely.
Can he get healthy, and can he build on what we saw before he went down? He was playing as good as he's played in a good long while. He fits into Darrell Bevel's system. Matthew Stafford, obviously.
Yep.
He fits into so to me, that's the one. What's he going to look like? Is he going to practice in the spring a little bit? Maybe not, but certainly be ready for fall camp, I would assume. So that's going to be what everybody's looking at.
Agree in how they treat him in the offseason. Obviously, they sat him a lot this summer. And maybe to your point, too, the backup quarterback, right? What the Lions do, not to steal your thunder, but what the Lions do at that position to ensure themselves in case of another Stafford injury.
Absolutely. I think they've been lucky. I mean, they have too long just written it off and say it's Matthew Stafford or nothing, and we don't care who it is after him. No, it doesn't matter, So now they have to confront that reality of saying, hey, we can't hope that he's going to be healthy. We got to count on somebody. And looking at Case Keenum playing for Washington, it's not really, inspiring to see who's out there. But whether it's they gotta, that's something they can't ignore. I think beyond everything else, forget the draft, forget everything else. If you have a mandate to have to win, and unfortunately that kind of colors the whole season and a few seasons beyond maybe. But you got to get a decent guy who's a borderline starter to back up Stafford, because that's the kind of thing is as much as you want to write off of 3 wins is 3 wins in the second half or first half. I don't believe that. I don't think most fans would believe that. I think you had a really credible backup quarterback. You would have won some games here, and that would have changed the conversation. Maybe kept them in the hunt, playoff contention, and that's enough playoff contention to keep them to save their jobs. So I think you got to go and get you can't draft a quarterback. Go get a quarterback. Go get a free agent.
I think you're right about that. They have $50 million in cap space, maybe more. They got to spend some of that on a veteran backup. We saw Teddy Bridgewater keep the Saints afloat, for a month, more than a month this year. Obviously, Blau not cutting it. We saw 5 starts. He had the bad pick today. Since the first game, he's had his struggles. So, free advice to Bob Quinn. I think we can all agree: get yourself a backup quarterback. Next year's a big year. Make sure you spend there. That way, that first pick of the draft, you can use it on one of those big time playmakers. That's going to help you. So, that'll do it for us here. End of the season, Lions again, 3-12-1, disappointing season, finishing last place in the NFC North, 9 straight losses to end the year, number 3 pick in the draft. But that should give us plenty to talk about in the months ahead, I guess. Should be some coaching changes on Matt Patricia's staff, that is, coming up next week. And we expect Matt Patricia to talk, the players to talk Monday, and Bob Quinn will talk very early next week as well. For Sean Windsor, Carlos Monarez, I'm Dave Burkett, Freep.com.